All right, 29.3 and 29.4 will be our lessons for today. So we're continuing on in chapter 29 in the next two sections. This is part two of the lecture series for chapter 29. So I'm going to jump right in, and then I'm going to explain the two labs, which also have just videos that I've demonstrated for you guys that you will watch today as well. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, the senses. The senses detect the internal and external environments. The senses help to maintain homeostasis. Again, here's our word homeostasis again. Senses gather stimuli and send it to the nervous system. We learned a little bit about the nervous system the other day. The nervous system responds to stimuli. In the first picture here, you can see the pupil is completely dilated here, which means it's more open. The pupil here is more constricted, so let's just go through these. Pupils shrink when there's too much light that enters the eye, and goosebumps occur when cold air touches your skin. So the eye actually kind of works similarly to a camera. The wider your pupil is, the more dilated it is, the more open it is, whatever you want to call it, the more light it's going to let in. So if it's really bright out, your pupil is going to constrict so it doesn't let as much light in because that light will actually burn your eye. So for instance, when you go outside, let's say, or even in the morning, if you have curtains in your room and then you open them up in the morning, or if someone comes into your room and turns the light on, your eyes like really hurt, right? That's because your pupil hasn't completely constricted yet to be a smaller size, and that's why the light hurts your eye. In the dark, your eye is trying to let in more light so it can see well in the dark, so it's going to open up or dilate more so that way you can see better. It also has a lot to do with your rods and your cones as well, but we're not going to get into that quite yet. There was something else I was going to mention about this. So if you go from a really bright room to outside and it's completely pitch black, or you walk into a dark room or dark closet or something like that, it's hard to see in the dark at first, right? You have to wait till your eyes, what we call, adjust, and that's because we're waiting for our rods and our cones to adjust, one, and then two, for our eye to dilate more, to let more light in so we can see in that dark room. Your senses detect physical and chemical stimuli, so the eye contributes to vision, obviously. Photoreceptors sense light. There's two photoreceptors that work together, your rod cells and cone cells. These are what cone cells look like. They kind of look like cones, that's why we call them that. And then these are rod cells, they kind of look like rods. So this is showing you what the inside of your eye looks like. So you've got the optic nerve here, you've got the retina here, like this yellowy part, and then you have your pupil, and then you have your lens, which is like this part. This is the iris, the part that constricts or dilates. And then this is your cornea. It's cool too if you've ever done an experiment. Maybe you can use your little brother, older sister, something as an example. If you or a dog, I guess, if you shine just a mild light, don't use a harsh light because you can actually damage your eye. But if you shine a light into your eye, you can actually watch your pupil constrict or dilate, which is super cool looking. So that's why if you go to like the doctor's office for a checkup, they're going to use that light and shine it into your eye because they're trying to see if your pupil is working correctly. But it's pretty cool. Try it out. You could even look in the mirror and do it to your own eye. So like shine a light in your eye and watch your pupil constrict. Take the light away, your pupil will then dilate again. Now we're talking about the ear. The ear obviously contributes to hearing. Mechanoreceptors called hair cells help in hearing. And there's also a bend in response to vibrations. So you've probably heard of your eardrum before, but your eardrum is called your eardrum because it actually vibrates. There's something called the tympanum too. You have the cochlea, which is like this curly-Q thing. Some people think it looks like a little snail shell. You've got your semicircular canals, which are these big loops. This is called your middle ear, this is your inner ear, and this is your outer ear. So this just goes into a lot of detail about the ear. You can take a look at that if you want. I'm not going to make you memorize all this or anything like that, but this just gives you a visual representation of what's going on. You can actually damage your eardrum or even what word am I looking for? Not crack your eardrum, burst your eardrum. If you stick like a Q-tip in too far, or if you listen to something super loud, so maybe you, I don't know, you heard a gunshot and you were standing right next to the person who was shooting off rounds, you can actually damage your eardrum, even cause it to burst. Sometimes people who are caught up in, like, I don't know, an explosion or something like that, you can have burst eardrums, which is why you see in movies, if someone is in an explosion or near an explosion, they always play that like ringing sound, like, you know, when your ear rings. That's kind of what happens. Like if you hear a really loud sound, your ear will start ringing. Taste and smell use chemoreceptors. I believe we've seen this picture before, but anyway, random. Your taste uses your tongue and smell uses your nose, but these guys work together. So for instance, if you hold your nose while you drink or eat something, you can't taste it as well, which is interesting because your sense of smell and your sense of taste kind of go hand in hand. So if you start to lose your sense of smell, you'll actually start to lose your sense of taste as well. If you have ever taken like a really nasty tasting medicine, your mom or dad might have told you just to plug your nose and then you can't taste as much. Or if you really hate vegetables, they say if you plug your nose, you can't taste them as much. But chemoreceptors detect signals dissolved in fluid. So what this guy looks like he's doing here is he's maybe plugging his nose and drinking orange juice, so you probably can't taste that orange juice as well. All right, touch. So the skin senses touch. You have all kinds of little nerves and even pain receptors, hair follicles that all contribute to touch. Mechanoreceptors detect pressure. Pain receptors detect damaged tissue. And thermoreceptors detect temperature. Hairs actually help you detect things. So here's kind of a broader example of this. If you have a cat or a dog at home who has whiskers, if you touch their whiskers, they know you're touching them, right? Even though you're not like directly touching their skin. Because you're moving their whiskers, they can feel that on their skin. So that's kind of a broad example of what's going on. If you have the hair on your arm, if you touch that, just the hair on your arm, you can still feel it on your arm. Go ahead and try that right now. All right, I'm not gonna go through all of these too much because you can kind of see what's going on here. I'm not gonna read the diagram off to you. I think you guys can look at that and read the descriptors over here. I will mention though that the heavy pressure receptor is down deeper in the tissue, and that should make sense why it's called that, because the harder you push on your skin, the more your heavy pressure receptor is going to feel that because it's heavy pressure. Your light pressure receptors are closer to the surface. All right, 29.4. The central nervous system interprets information and the peripheral nervous system gathers and transmits information. So we talked a little about the CNS and the PNS in the last slide or last section, so we're going to continue on with that. CNS includes your brain, brainstem, and spinal cord. So again, this is the central nervous system. So these are all like the central parts: brain, brainstem, spinal cord. Brain, brainstem, spinal cord. PNS, peripheral nervous system, is like all the outer parts, includes 4 systems of nerves. So that's what all these yellow things are. Those are nerves. Your CNS and PNS work together and pass signals between each other. So the sensory receptor generates an impulse. Your PNS passes the impulse to the CNS. The CNS interprets the impulse. Your CNS passes the impulse back to the PNS, and then the PNS will stimulate a response. So you might be asking yourself, why does it have to go from the PNS to the CNS back to the PNS? Well, the main reason is because it needs to transmit it to your brain. So your peripheral system is going to pass that information to your brain to tell your body what's going on, and then your body is going to send signals back to the PNS to stimulate some sort of response. Your brain is basically telling your body what to do. So your body is telling your brain what's happening, then your brain is telling your body what to do. You can kind of think of it, this just popped into my head, kind of like we have rovers on Mars. So like we have a International Space Station, or it's the guys at NASA with the little remote control who are driving the rover. They can't actually they don't know exactly what's going on in the moon. Like, sure, we have video. We have maybe sound or something like that. I don't know. You can't really hear sound in space, but maybe they do. Have some sort of sensor that can detect sounds. But what's going on is that guy who's sitting in a NASA space station on Earth can't actually physically feel or see what's going on Mars. Only that he can only take the information that the rover is sending him. Then what he does is he's like, okay, maybe the rover's about to fall off a cliff, and he sees that, but he's not actually there, but he sees it because of the video. So he's going to either turn around or stop the rover. So that would be like the brain telling the body what to do, and he's telling the body or the rover what to do with his remote control. So maybe that's an example to help you out a little bit there. All right, the CNS processes information. So now we're talking about the brain in specific here. So the brain has 3 parts. You have the cerebrum, which controls thought, movement, emotion. So here's the cerebrum here. And then you've got the cerebellum, which allows for balance. Here's your cerebellum. And then the brain stem controls basic life functions. So this is our brain stem, which is at the very base of the brain here, brain stem. And you've got the different parts of the brain stem. So like the oblongata, wow, I can't talk today. Oblongata, the medulla, pons, midbrain. So that's all these parts here. All right, here it's going into a little bit more detail. Midbrain controls some reflexes. Pons regulates breathing. Medulla oblongata controls heart function, swallowing, coughing. Your spinal cord now, we're talking about controls reflexes. So the sensory neuron will send impulses to the spinal cord. So again, your PNS is sending signals to your CNS, which your spinal cord is included in the CNS. The spinal cord directs impulse to motor neuron. This part does not involve the brain. These are just spinal cord neurons. The PNS links the CNS to muscles and other organs. So the somatic nervous system regulates voluntary movement. So like if I wanted to do bicep curls with a weight or something like that, that's a voluntary movement. My heart beating is not a voluntary movement. That is involuntary. I'm not constantly telling my heart to beat. The autonomic nervous system controls involuntary functions. So your sympathetic nervous system is your fight versus flight system. Are you going to fight or are you going to run away? Parasympathetic nervous system calms the body and conserves energy. So let's take a look at this. Here's a big overview. Nervous system. You've got the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. Now, the central nervous system we kind of already talked about. That includes like your brain, your spinal cord, brainstem. This doesn't actually do any movements, right? Your spinal cord, you can't tell your spinal cord to move. You can tell the muscles around your bones, around your spinal cord to move, and therefore your spinal cord will move, but your spinal cord itself isn't actually going to move, if that makes sense. All right, peripheral nervous system then breaks down into the somatic nervous system, which is voluntary, and your autonomic nervous system, which is involuntary. So this one's pretty self-explanatory, like I said, with muscles. If I want to go for a run, I'm telling my leg muscles to run, right? That's voluntary. I'm telling them what to do. Involuntary, I don't tell them what to do, but they're going to do it anyway. So your autonomic nervous system, this should kind of make sense because it's automatic, autonomic, involuntary. You've got your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. Sympathetic, this is one where if you have, let's say you almost get into a car accident and you have high levels of stress. You're either going to want to fight or flight. Some people even freeze up. Parasympathetic nervous system, this is your calm and relaxing nervous system. Okay, that is the end of 29.4. So we just covered 29.3 and 29.4. You are going to watch the videos on the two labs, the 29.3 lab and the 29.4 lab. They're pretty interesting labs. I just want you to watch the demos that I've made for you guys. You guys can try these at home if you would like as well. They're kind of fun. So I hope you enjoy the labs today.